How much does an asset search cost? You may need an asset search for litigation, maybe for a judgment recovery, maybe to find out if a party to a lawsuit has enough money to pay before you even get into the lawsuit. Maybe you've already won a lawsuit. In some cases, an asset search is done for part of like a divorce or probate. For whatever reason, you need an asset search. The next question that comes up is how much do I have to pay? How much does it cost? And this is probably the most common question that people ask about an asset search. And that's not really the most important factor. The most important factor is what type of asset search do you want? So you may have seen on our website or other websites asset search details that explain what goes into an asset search. And you'll see prices ranging anywhere from about $100 up to several $1,000s. So what's the difference? Well, the most important thing to determine is what you're using the asset search for, because in reality, you can actually do an asset search for free. You can do your own asset search and pay nothing for that search. Most of the cost of an asset search is labor. It's somebody physically pulling records, pulling documents, and you could do it the easy way, you could do it the hard way. Depends on how good you need to do it. First of all, this electronic asset search is something you'll see all over the internet. Asset search $100, asset search $200. Basically, that is just pushing a few buttons. It's kind of like a fancy Google search that looks for assets in different categories, things like real estate, vehicles, um, sometimes corporate assets. But it's just whatever that database has. And there's a lot of databases: LexisNexis, TLO, Experian. And it's just hitting certain databases to get records. Now, here's the difference. Most of those private databases, they're not official records. It's not the government records for real estate. It's not the government records for bank accounts. It's not the official records for vehicles. It's just some company that over the years has pulled certain data from different sources. They put it in their computer. And when you do a search, you push a button, put in a name and address, it pops up whatever they happen to have in their system. It may not be everything, but it's cheap and it's easy because the labor takes about 30 seconds. If you had us do an electronic asset search, all we would do is take the name and address that you give us, type it into a box, hit enter, and whatever pops up on the screen, we reformat a little bit, make it into a PDF file, and send it to you. It takes us about 15 minutes. Costs us about $10, $15 worth of fees to that company. We'll charge you $169 for it. Now, it'll probably take you longer to do it because you may not have access to that database or some of those records and know how to do it. So it may be still worth it to do for 169. But it's important to know that that's different from what you see full service asset search. What's the difference? Well, the difference is that on an actual investigated asset search, what the investigators will do, instead of just typing a name, pushing a button, they will actually go and pull the official records from various sources: the real estate records, copies of deeds, mortgages, liens, the banking records from the various banking sources, pull the DMV records for vehicles. And each one of those searches has a certain amount of time. It might take an hour or two to do each search, right? And there's 14 different types of assets. It's not just one search that looks at everything. The real estate records are searched at the county recorder's office. Vehicle records are searched at the DMV. Banking records are searched using OSINT or Swift codes or other available records. Corporate records are searched from the Secretary of State, right? So there's 4 or 5 examples, and there's 14 of those that you have to search. Intellectual property, things like patents, trademarks, copyrights, those are at PACER, the federal record system. So if you really want an actual asset search, that's how you would do it. Now, you could do the same thing yourself for free. You can see on here, it takes us between 12 and 14 hours per case to do this search, hours of labor. Normally it's done over 2 or 3 days. We do about 3 or 4 hours a day because in between, sometimes while we wait for records to come back from one place, we can use those records for the next search. So if we did it all at once, we wouldn't get everything. But you could do the same thing yourself. You could spend the 12 or 14 hours, review, research all those records, and save a lot of money because the actual cash cost of doing those searches probably is only going to be $500 or $600. So if you want to do all this yourself, instead of spending $2,000 to pay somebody to do that labor, you could just do all those searches for those asset classes, pay the fees to the sources, like the county recorder might charge you $100 for copies of deeds. The DMV might charge you $100 for real estate for vehicle records. The banking sources might charge you $500 or $600, right? So once you add all those up, you might only have to pay 500 or 600 and do all the labor yourself to save some money. That's why in between we have an assisted do-it-yourself. What we do here is we do the electronic search. We also give you the links and the sources and the addresses for all of the other searches that need to get done. We don't do any of the searching. We give you our checklist, our worksheet with the links for that subject. So if the subject, let's say, is in Phoenix, that'd be Maricopa County, we give you the links for Maricopa County to get real estate, the links for DMV, the links for the banking records, and then you have to do the search. And whatever the fees are to those sources, you have to pay those. But it makes it a little bit easier. So, for about $100 more than electronic, you get the worksheet. You still have to do the work. You're going to have to spend, 12 to 14 hours, maybe more. As a civilian, you probably don't have the efficiency. It might take you 17, 18 hours, and you'll have to pay a few $100 in fees to the various sources for the records. So why would the electronic search have different results than this search? Well, the electronic sources like LexisNexis, first of all, they don't go to all the different 12 sources. They just ping a couple different places. So they're not going to have all the records. In addition, their records are not updated on a daily basis. They may only download real estate records once a year, every other year. They may only download vehicle records every 6 months or once a year. So the records won't be complete. What we always say is, from our experience, the electronic search is about 60% accurate. If you do the search yourself and do it properly, it's more like 90 to 95% accurate. So that's the difference. So it depends on what you need to search for, and is it worth spending more money, right? If you can get away with just basic records that aren't going to be 100%, you can save a couple grand on an asset search. If you really want a true asset search, somebody has got to spend 12 to 14 hours doing searching. Doesn't have to be anybody in particular, as long as they know what they're doing. Could be us, could be yourself. You could pay somebody else. Whatever you do, though, is if you do really need a genuine, full, real asset search, don't try to get away with this, because if you go to court with an electronic asset search, they're going to throw it out because it's not admissible, because the records don't have an actual source. If you want to have 100% and not miss any assets, don't try to do an electronic search. Pay somebody or do it yourself. Spend the time or the money, and you don't have to spend $2,000. You can actually do it yourself. Most of the cost is labor, and you can save yourself a few bucks. We say this because we want to try to give you the options, because there's no one right way to do an asset search. It depends upon the use of the client. If you really need full records for some legal proceeding, there is a right way. You want to do the full search. But sometimes you're just curious. You want to get a rough idea without diving into all the details. Do a basic electronic search, right? Or do some of the searching yourself. Maybe you don't need real estate or vehicles. Then do it yourself and just search for bank accounts, right? And save a little bit of money there. No licensed, legitimate investigative agency will do just bank accounts by itself, because sometimes what happens is the bank records that come back from the financial institutions may be missing one bank account, but if you search for vehicles, you'll find it there. Or if you search for real estate, you'll find it on the closing statement. So normally a licensed, legitimate agency is going to only want to do a full asset search, not just cherry pick different types. But that's up to you. If you want to do it yourself, you don't have to search for everything. You can just search for part of it, and you may have already done some of that. So hopefully that answers your questions. If you have additional questions beyond that, you can click the link. Active Intel's our website. There's a place where you can book an appointment with an actual human to discuss your case further. You can actually get a consultation with a licensed private investigator. We'd be glad to provide that. But either way, make sure you understand what type of asset search you're getting into, because a lot of these online websites say, hey, yeah, asset search $100, but you're not getting exactly what you need. Make sure that what you need is being provided for in the type of search that you get. And if you have questions,